Hi, this is Aliana from Malditang Librarian, and for this video, I will be sharing with you some tips on how to pass the board exam. So you may ask, who am I to tell you how to pass the board exam? I have been working as a professional librarian here in the Philippines since April 2015, and during the Librarians Licensure Examination in 2015, I actually ranked #1. And here I will give you some tips on how I did it. And as for ranking #1, at that time, I really wanted to be #1. So I did everything I could to achieve it. I studied all I can, I answered all the practice exams, and I just didn't rely on my reviewers. I also did my own research and did my own studying outside the reviewers. And I really believed that I would be #1. So I think that's the secret. You really have to want it, because if you want it enough, you are going to put in the effort in order to achieve it. So this is more for the Librarian Licensure exam in the Philippines, but my tips could also apply to other professions. According to PRC, the Librarian's Licensure exam schedule for this year will be on September 8 to 9, 2021. And the applications for the exam opened last June 8, and according to the PRC schedule, it will close on August 9. But these schedules might be subject to change because of the pandemic and the restrictions in different provinces. But since this year, the PRC has been conducting the exams even with the pandemic. So they just follow the health protocols recommended. As for my own review, I graduated in April 2014, and I had a year to review because the next board exam was in April 2015. So I created my own schedule, and I really allotted time every week in order to study. I have a free eBook that you can find in the link down below. So this is a compilation of the blog entries I had in malditang.librarian.com on all my board exam tips. But I compiled it all in one format, so in case people need it, they can just download it in one file. Passing the board exam is just the beginning. Passing the board and being a licensed professional isn't even a guarantee that you are going to be a very good librarian or professional. So it's still something that you should learn about. You should still continue learning because the field is changing and the changes are fast. So my first tip would be to think like a librarian or whatever profession you aspire to be. Like for example, I just didn't rely on the reviewers, but I also researched on my own, through books, through the internet, for other resources that I can use for my study. Don't cram. So you have still around 3 months until the board exam, and it's better to study a little every day or every week rather than cram near the exam. Because near the exam, you're supposed to be resting, and by that time, you should have studied everything you need. So cramming, actually, for me, it doesn't help because it adds pressure to you, and sometimes it's not very effective in processing information. So as much as possible, if you have time, try to schedule your study to prevent you from cramming near the exam. Tip number 3 would be avoid distractions. So this can include social media, your negative friends, and other things that might distract you. When I was studying for the board exam, I really deactivated my Facebook for several months because I knew that I would be really distracted by social media. And of course, if you're taking the board, there's a lot of people who would give you advice, who would tell you what to do. But in my opinion, I had my own way, and this thing works for me. So take advice with a grain of salt, because what works for others might not be working for you. Also avoid negative thinking, avoid negative thoughts, because we can't help it that we will feel negative, we will feel nervous and afraid of the board exam. But instead of giving in to those negative thoughts in your head, it's better to give yourself affirmations that you can do it. So for me, I always would put number one in my room. I would put it in my notebooks, in my reviewers. And if I was having a hard time studying, I would always say that I was going to top the board exam, even if I didn't really feel like studying. So giving myself positive images and trying to think of positive thoughts, even if I didn't feel like it, actually helped me a lot in studying for the board exam. And also, if you have negative friends, because I've heard of some test takers who are like, people around them aren't really encouraging them to study. And try to avoid these people as much as possible. I actually only activated my Facebook once I passed the board exam. Know yourself and your ideal studying environment. Each of us has a different learning process, and use what works best for you. Some people study well in silence, some people study better in background noise. So try to find what works best for you and do that. Another very important tip is to take practice exams and practice answering multiple choice questions. The board exam is all multiple choice, but it's actually good for the test taker because the answer is already there and you only have to choose. And if there are questions that you really have no idea about because you didn't study for it, it didn't come up in your review, but if you know how to take multiple choice questions and you have practiced your analysis skills, you can actually deduce the correct answer if you eliminate other answers once you analyze the question. Also, be careful of words like not, except, and other tricky questions that might lead you to confusion. So it's better to really analyze the question and the answers. Not everything in your review will go out of the board exam, and you might even encounter questions that you don't really know. So this is important. You have to practice taking multiple choice exams. So what I did was, before I studied for every subject, I took a practice exam. So when I checked my own paper, I was assessing what areas I didn't know about and my weaknesses. So these are the things that I focused on studying. And after studying for a while, I would take the exam again to see how I have improved. And it's not just one practice exam. I think I took about hundreds of practice exams until I was scoring almost perfect scores in them. For the board exam, it's important to know the basics of each subject, but it's also good to research on new trends. For example, I remember that I encountered some questions that I didn't encounter in my studies, but I knew about them because I read about them online. So sometimes what they say about the board exam relying on stock knowledge is true. So it's really important to go back to your basic lessons when you were in college. And I always say that the review doesn't start after you graduate. It starts in the classroom. So it's better that while you were studying for your master's or your undergraduate degree, you already understood the basic concepts. That's why it's called review, because you are reviewing your past lessons. It doesn't mean nga, sorry, I'm going to speak in Ilonggo, but hindi nga, anay nga ulihin na, dito kaya nagtuon. Like, you only studied near the exam, or you only understood what your subjects meant during the review. While you are an undergraduate or studying your MLIS, it's good if you are already familiarizing yourself with the basics of the 6 main subjects in the board exam. So number 7 is understand, do not memorize. There will be things that you really do need to memorize, like the Dewey Decimal Classification or the Library of Congress Classification. But it's not that you should memorize all the tables and all the sub-classifications. It's good to be familiar with it, the basic classification schemes. And also, you might have to remember the important persons and the important organizations and dates. But if you understand first, memorizing will come easier. And there will be questions that will test your analysis. For example, situations in the library. So you might not have reviewed about this, but it requires your analysis and experience in the library. Prepare your documents as early as possible. There will be a lot of requirements in applying for the board, like your birth certificates, your transcripts of records, a certificate of good moral character, and others. So it's good that if you always go to PRC website or their social media pages for updates. I also post on Malditang Librarian, but of course sometimes I'm not getting this news early, or I might not have time to update my page or my blog. So it's good if you are updated yourself. Like for example, your transcript of records from your university might take some time to process. And keep in mind, some places are still under quarantine and have different restrictions. It might take some time, especially during the pandemic, to request your important documents. Always read the details because you might miss something. Like the transcript of records has to have a picture and remarks for board exam purposes only. So you have to contact your registrar to request these documents with these special details. I am emphasizing this one because I want you to only stress about the board exam and not your documents. Just imagine, you are near the board exam but you are still stressed because may mga documents ka pang kulang. So it's better to prepare these documents as early as possible. And if you can apply as early as possible, it's also good. Another tip that people often neglect is their health. So in the board exam, you might be tempted to cram, to stay up late, to study, but this is not recommended. You also need to take care of your health. Eat healthy food, get adequate rest, and even if you have time to exercise, it's also good. Because when I was studying, I also took time every week just to go for walking and do something to keep my mind off studying. And exercise has a lot of benefits on your emotions, on your mental health, so I definitely recommend that. And also eat healthy food such as fruits, vegetables, and nuts, and foods that you love, that you feel refreshed with, and it will make you feel good. So if you take care of your body, you're also taking care of your mind, and it will give you optimum performance during the board exam. Last tip is to take a break. So you don't have to study 24/7. You also need to take breaks for your mental health because your brain can process information better if you rest and take adequate rest and sleep. During your review, don't just sit in your room, but if you have studied for quite some time and you're too focused on it for a long time, why don't you go watch a movie or take a walk or do something else? Because your brain also needs a break. And it will actually give you energy and motivation for your next study session. So that's it for this video. So if you have more suggestions on what you want me to talk about regarding libraries or library science, you can comment below. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also visit malditang librarian.com for updates.